Okay, it's the top of the hour here, and welcome everybody to today's CAB workshop. Top five innovative agenda sessions. Let's just give it a 30 seconds or so for folks to join the call before we get started. Okay, looks like we've got a large group attending today. So again, welcome everybody to today's webinar, Top 5 Innovative Agenda Sessions. My name's Gavin Nathan. I'm a partner, co-founder, a senior consultant here at Ignite Advisory Group. We specialize in customer advisory boards. It's all we do all day, every day. We've been doing this for over 14 years now, and done hundreds of customer advisory board meetings. So I'm going to share some of those learnings with you today. A couple of housekeeping items. The workshop is being recorded. We'll send a recording afterwards. Any questions, feel free to use the Q&A within the Zoom meeting, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end, time permitting. So this is a 30-minute webinar. So we're going to go as fast as possible to make sure we give you as much information within that time frame. So here's today's agenda, covering 4 things. First thing is meeting engagement challenges. Secondly, the must-haves for CAB agenda sessions. The main focus is going to be these top 5 innovative agenda sessions. And then we're going to direct you to some great CAB resources at the end. So let's start by exploring some meeting engagement challenges. We're seeing a lot of interest around customer advisory board meetings now post-pandemic. People are keen to meet more frequently in person, but there's still obviously a lot of Zoom meetings happening in between those in-person meetings. A lot of people are obviously suffering from Zoom fatigue at this point. One of the reasons is that a lot of canned PowerPoint slides, both for in-person and virtual meetings. We see lots of advisory board programs that are managed, not by us, by others, that rely too heavily on PowerPoint. Also see a lot of product demos and product pitches happening within CAB meetings. And people are also unclear on the participation ground rules, like as a member of an advisory board, what am I expected to contribute to a particular meeting or at a particular time? So sometimes there's confusion from the members. Also, minimal discussion, where you're trying to assemble people together for the primary purpose of discussion. We see minimal discussion in some of the advisory board meetings that are out there, and ultimately nothing learned. Host companies often come to us with pretty frustrated because they've been running their advisory board themselves, and quite frankly, they're not getting the insights out of it, and they're not learning anything from the program. So this is some of the challenges that we have experienced when we look at customer advisory board programs out there in the industry. So let's look at the secrets to success. How do we overcome this? Well, firstly, we need to know what we're aiming for here. And, the secret to success for members is really all around engagement. So what do I mean by that? In order for a member to be engaged, what we're trying to do is deliver value. These are customers, these are clients, partners, and members of these customers advisory boards. Engagement is the key thing, and we can engage them by delivering them value. So that's the key thing there, delivering them value so they will remain engaged in the session and in the program for the long term. What's the secret to success for the host company? For you, the hosts, the corporations that are putting on these advisory councils, it's basically around insights. That's a real key thing that we find from an agenda session. Is it needs to be insightful. You need to deliver insights that are ideally actionable and preferably new to the organization. You haven't been able to access these insights through other customer engagement programs that you have available to you. So we're looking for engaging and insightful agenda sessions. So how do we get there? How do we get engaging and insightful agenda sessions? Well, these are kind of the must-haves to a successful customer advisory board agenda session. First of all, the agenda needs to be customer driven. So we need to be selecting topics that the members want to discuss. That's the primary thing here. So definitely a need to interview members in advance of a meeting to understand what's top of mind for them. Okay, secondly is the 80-20 rule. So the most important thing here for any advisory board session, ideally, is for the customers to be speaking, the clients to be speaking 80% of the time. When you achieve this, the customers say, hey, that was awesome. I learned so much from listening to my peers. And then you, the host, and your executive team turns around and says, hey, that was awesome. We learned so much from listening to the customers. So that's why the 80-20 rule in terms of participation during every agenda session is really important. So you need to design for that in advance of the meeting. One of the best ways to get there is obviously to hire experienced CAB facilitators, people that have run these meetings before. Their primary focus is going to be on allowing for open dialogue, keeping the entire agenda on track, making sure that everybody is participating equally. No one member is dominating the discussion, and the discussion is objective, and there's an element of fairness in exchanges. So it really is having an individual that is really focused on achieving the session objectives for every session on the agenda is really important. So that's the role of that facilitator. That's a key component of an engaging and insightful agenda session. So at Ignite, we've actually developed a variety of different facilitation techniques. So there's about 15 of these facilitation techniques that we can vote together to build an engaging advisory board agenda session. Here's a quick list of some of them. Obviously, case studies, getting customers to step up and explain how they've solved challenges and how they're using products. Panel discussion. This is really important when you've got very mature members of the group. They're able to share their learnings with some of the maybe the newer members of the group. Voting is a great technique if you want to get people's opinions very quickly, individual opinions very quickly. Wall of ideas. This is a concept here of brainstorming on post-it notes and plastering them all over a wall and then looking for patterns. Working in pairs, working with the person next door to you to come up with an idea or solve a challenge or share an insight. And breakouts. Breakouts are awesome, getting people into small groups so they can interact with each other and again, solve a challenge or complete an exercise. So big fan of breakouts. There's about 15 of these different techniques. And again, we bolt them together to build a really great agenda session. So let's take a look at some of those sessions now. We're going to be focusing on 5 sessions that we typically use. We like to think they're a little bit different than the standard advisory board session, and they're proven. They're highly effective. That's why we keep going back to them. So the first one here is around product development. Now it's quite frequent within an advisory board program for you to be looking for ideas that will potentially end up on the product roadmap. Okay, so what are we trying to do during this session? For you as the host of these programs, it's typically prioritizing product development, knowing which items to include on the roadmap, the priority around them, and ensuring that the roadmap is customer driven, ensuring that you are building products that have that necessary customer input to be successful. The other side of it for the member, what is the member looking to get out of this? And we're going to ask this question during every one of these top agenda sessions. What is the goal for the member? Because it can't just be about the host company, okay? So what is the member? What is the business value that we're delivering to the member? two things here primarily. Getting insight into the roadmap. They're keen to know what your roadmap is. They've invested in your product. They want to know what the future is, right? And they're also looking to influence that direction. You know, maybe they've got some things that they'd like to see on the roadmap. So that's what they're looking for out of this. So let's focus on how we make that happen. So a typical product development feedback session, the number one mistake that I see people doing within CAD programs is actually showing the entire product roadmap, spending half an hour talking through it and then saying, okay, give us your feedback. I tell you why that's becomes a bit of a problem. It's because people always want more stuff on the roadmap and they want it quicker, okay? And there's also a problem in that companies may not be able to necessarily change their roadmaps. There may not be a lot of flexibility in there. So it becomes a bit of a frustrating experience if you're involved in that kind of session. So we actually advise people not to show the entire roadmap. I mean, there's also IP and confidentiality reasons for not doing it as well, okay? Instead, focusing on the trade-offs, right? So where exactly within the product roadmap are you looking for customer feedback? Where are you looking for that critical customer input? Let's focus on those particular areas instead of doing the whole roadmap in one session, right? And of course, you have limited R&D budget, so it's all about trade-offs. So where are the trade-offs? Where are the areas where you can go down route A versus route B? So this is a session that we typically use. There's 4 or 6 of these, maybe potential investments, we can call them. We got to decide which ones the customers are interested in, which ones to move forward in, and the priority attached to them. So the best way of doing this is to use some sort of a voting mechanism. Dots are really good. So concept of giving people first, second, third choice dots. We see some examples of this on the right-hand side of the page here. And again, what we're trying to do here is give you real pictures from real live customer advisory board meetings, so you can see how these principles are actually used in practice here. So all these charts are things that we've actually worked on. So in this example here, concept of dots, concept of dollars, being able to vote on different investments that are being proposed for the roadmap. And of course, you've got limited dollars. You can't do everything. So it's all about trade-offs, making decisions. Those decision points are critical. And then the most important thing to do is to then discuss the results. So why did people make those investment decisions? Why did people make those trade-offs? And also, is there any other things that now we've gone through this exercise, any other investments that should be considered here? So that's a really good way to approach product roadmap sessions. Another alternative way of doing it, this is something that I actually created here, is to give people kind of like a pyramid. And you can see these pyramids being used on the desks here at an actual customer advisory board meeting. And the pyramids can be flipped very quickly. So you can visually see around the room how everybody has voted at any one time. So the host company would present maybe a project that they're keen to put on the roadmap or deciding what to do with. And then we ask the members to vote green, red, or yellow. Green is typically great value. Yes, go ahead. Red is low value. Wouldn't add to, you wouldn't help my business necessarily. And the third option is yellow. And yellow really is need more research, because quite often these are initial ideas, and there's quite often more research to be done both internally and also from the customers before they can make a decision. So this is where it gets interesting, is we can then look around the room, identify the trends, and then dig into how some people voted to understand their thinking around these particular roadmap alternatives. Okay, that's enough about product development. Let's move on to design thinking. Design thinking is obviously a very hot topic. It's gaining a lot of success in organizations around the world. Typically, design thinking is used to around certain goals. So it could be improving products. It could be improving services, processes. It kind of enables out of the box thinking and challenges the assumptions and the customers' assumptions that they bring to the table around what you're doing as the host company. It's a great technique for problem solving. So if you want to bring a problem to the advisory board to solve, design thinking is a great set of techniques that you can use in doing that. So here, the great concept here, I'm going to run through the example here of improving the onboarding process. So if we bring that as a challenge to the members, this would be great for some sort of a breakout. So first thing we do before we do breakouts is have a group discussion on the topic, so we can gain some idea of maybe what the challenges are around improving the onboarding process. Let's just capture these. Let's take a step back and come to agreement on the problem that we're trying to solve. Once we've identified the problem, then we'll assign groups. Typically 4 to 6 people works best in a breakout group. And it's good if we can tackle the problem from different angles. So what I mean by that is maybe we put all of the finance people in one group, or the healthcare people in one group, and all auto folks in another group, or maybe we divide the groups between CIOs and CISOs, so we understand how the CIOs would tackle this versus how the CISOs would potentially tackle this. And it's really fascinating when it gets to the readouts, so we can contrast those different perspectives. So anyway, it's really important to give people a template to complete a group exercise, so they're not left scratching their heads and trying to figure out what we're trying to achieve here. So here you can see a typical template. It works. You're off the cuff for lots of different examples here. When we ask people to look at the current state, so what is the current state of the onboarding process? What is our ideal state? What would you really like the onboarding process to look like? What does it need to do for you? And then how do we get there? How do we move from the current state to the ideal state? And then it's also good to do readouts afterwards. So inviting the team leads to then do a quick readout on these particular findings. So that's the concept of design thinking. And let's just quickly move on here. Top agenda session number 3, strategy simulation role play. This is a real fun one. I've got to say, this is probably the most fun out of all of the advisory board sessions that I've seen here. So what we do is we take a real world business scenario and we create a story or a challenge. And there's two things that need to happen here. One, there needs to be some sort of constraint, and also needs to be a sense of urgency. So this is literally a business simulation that we're setting up here. So it could be a natural disaster, it could be a hurricane hitting, it could be a supply chain disruption, shipping costs double overnight, COVID, the pandemic, cyber attack. So we simulate that and we set up like a control room. And this is great because the host company can observe how the clients make strategic decisions under pressure. And the CAP members love doing this. They love to be intellectually challenged and thinking through these scenarios that they could potentially face in the future. So let's take a look at an example here. What we're doing here is a simulation here. And we start by putting people into small groups, assigning a team lead and explaining the story. In this example, there's a hurricane approaching the data center. What actions do you take? If you're responsible for managing that data center, what actions would you take? What's your strategy? And then we come back into the room 20 minutes later, and we'd explain to the group, hey, look, we just lost power. What do you do now under this set of circumstances? There's a hurricane coming, you've just lost power. What do you do now? And then lastly, we come in maybe 40 minutes and then explain that, I don't know, there's something else chaotic has happened, such as a cyber attack or something like that. So this is great. It really gets people thinking, and the members get a lot of value out of these kind of simulations. Okay, top agenda session number 4 here. We call this one Shark Tank. I'm sure lots of you have seen the TV show. We're going to borrow on some of those principles that make the TV show so successful. So the goal here for the host company is to identify completely new products or product add-ons that they could potentially bring to the market. And the member goal is also to do the same thing, ironically. So it's identify new products and things that they could bring to the new market. And it only works if you're in a business where this is something where you're trying to do with your customers, right? Because there's no reason your customers would want to create new products for you otherwise. You know, they question why you're doing the exercise. So it only really works if there is really a mutually beneficial industry for you to work together on. So I'm going to give you an example here. This is something that we did with an insurance company, and they actually worked with different brokers. So again, they're incentivized to jointly bring products to market, okay? So we pre-assign the shark teams in advance, and we get them to complete a business case template. So they're not left scratching their head thinking, oh, how do we come up with a business model? How do we do this? We actually give them, there's actually an actual proven business case template that's used for startups. And it includes things such as the marketing strategy, the distribution channels, the pricing, the return on investment estimate. We give them that template and actually like, you know, seeing that template. And we invite them to complete it as a team. And ultimately, the goal is to deliver a pitch back to the Shark Tank panel. And this can typically be the host company and key members of the advisory board stakeholders there to select a winner. Okay, so that's the Shark Tank. And coming on to our last innovative agenda session, this is something we call Moonshot. So here, the goal is to understand how the industry could evolve in the long term. Obviously, that's really important for strategic planning. And the goal for the members is kind of the same thing. I mean, they enjoy blue sky breakthrough thinking, right? It's all about that. And they enjoy sharing their vision for the future with their peers and for the host company members as well. So that's why this is so successful. So let's talk about how we set this up. Here's a great example here. So you can see the flow of the session. So the first thing is maybe we're talking about what new technologies could disrupt the industry in the future. So we're going to get everybody's ideas. We're going to do that wall of ideas technique that I mentioned earlier. So it's getting people to write down, you know, a disruptive technology and then putting it on the wall on a post-it note. And then we're going to quickly sort these. We call it a fast sort to try to put them into groups and make sense of the technology trends. So now we understand the disruptive technology trends in the industry. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to assume Elon Musk has given you $1 billion to disrupt the industry and gain the largest market share. And this could happen, right? This guy's got a lot of money. How would you do it? If you were given that money by Elon Musk, if you had this amazing vision for the industry, if you could see what was happening with these disruptive technologies, what would you do? So maybe this is something we could do working in pairs. Again, that's another technique that I mentioned earlier on. And then ultimately, we would share, different pairs would come up with different ideas as to what would happen. And it really is insightful. It can really change your perspective on what's going to happen to the industry, where the competitive threats are, and in the future. And it's really important at the end of this discussion, and also at the end of all the agenda sessions that you have on an advisory board meeting, is to really reflect on what we've learned from this. And this sort of discussion, this sort of exercise is going to teach us about where the industry is heading and what potentially those competitive threats are. Okay, so I know we've gone really fast here. That was the purpose of today's session, is to give you as much information in this short period of time that we have together. I feel like we've only just started, but we're already 25 minutes into it now. So let's just do a quick recap. We have talked about 5 innovative agenda sessions: product development trade-offs, design thinking, concept of a strategy simulation, the Shark Tank exercise, and finally the Moonshot. So Ignite actually has 20 of these, I like to call them awesome session templates. We've worked on them a lot, perfected them over time. Turnkey session templates that work at advisory board meetings with, you know, quite frankly, very senior level executive audiences. So if you'd like to learn more, we definitely encourage you to join our CAB training. It's coming up here very shortly in July. Great opportunity to learn from many of the techniques that we've learned today, and a lot more best practices on not just agenda sessions, but the whole cycle of running a successful advisory board. So definitely encourage you to attend that. Secondly, go to our website, lots of resources there. If you feel as if you have a need for us, more than willing to jump on the phone or Zoom and then talk to you about that. So we can discuss your program and make some suggestions of how it could potentially be improved or how to start a new program. And that's it. I think that's all we have time for today. Like advisory board meetings, we like to stick to the agenda and finish on time. We've actually got time, 5 minutes here for some questions by the looks of it. So I wonder if my colleague Tatiana could help out and suggest some questions that we've seen in the chat here.
Sure, I've been answering them, but here's one. Do you have standards or recommendations for CAB meeting cadence?
CAB meeting cadence. Yeah, geez, that's definitely beyond the topic of agenda sessions. That's talking about the whole program there. But yes, we definitely see some patterns happening across the industry. Most advisory boards meet on a quarterly basis, or at least aim to meet on a quarterly basis. They don't always achieve that, so maybe every 4 months or so. And typically what we see is one annual in-person meeting. The annual in-person meeting is either a day or a day and a half of meeting time. That's when you bring everyone together annually. And in between that, the meetings are typically, the quarterly meetings, which are virtual, are typically 2 to 2.5 hours long. So that's what we see being typical for the average Zoom meeting.
Great, and then we have just a few minutes. Any good recommendations for hybrid cabs? And that will be a topic of a future cab workshop, but any comments?
Yeah, hybrid, it's tough. It's tough because you obviously want to get people together. That's often the main focus of the annual meeting specifically. For hybrid cabs, when you're trying to do things virtually and in person, we encourage the latest video equipment. So if you can imagine a conference room and you've got the people that have attended in person, but this is a hybrid meeting, right? So you've also got people attending virtually on Zoom. You need very good video equipment. You need the cameras that track people around the room. And you also need 2 facilitators. You need a facilitator for the in-person experience, and you also need another facilitator for the online virtual experience, just to make sure they're both in sync. People are engaged and insightful. Again, I'm gonna mention those 2 words that I started off with here. The facilitator's role is to make sure that the members are engaged and the meeting is insightful for the host company.
We can have one final question here. It's a good one. For global companies, would it be recommended to have separate meetings in separate regions? So talking about global cabs and geos.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a big question. It all depends, where the companies are located exactly globally. Are they in relatively similar time zones? And language obviously comes into play as well. If there is commonality in language, in time zones, and also in business models as well, right? Because you got to remember, the regulations that companies face in the US is slightly different to Europe and very different to Asia. So, there needs to be commonality if you're going to bring people similar people together. So that can be a problem if there's too much diversity in business models, operating environments, and regulations, etc.
And thanks, Gavin. People have been saying it's been really great content, and you can go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a new format, only 30 minutes. It seems to me as if it felt like only 10 minutes, but hopefully people got really good value, and we'll be doing more of these in the series, and reach out to us if you need help. Thank you.